The coffee mug slipped from Captain Jake Morrison's fingers, shattering against the polished floor of Earth's Deep Space Command Center. But he didn't notice. His entire world had just collapsed into a single terrifying transmission crackling. Through the quantum receivers at exactly 0200 hours on what should have been just another quiet night shift, static filled the air like electronic screams. But through the chaos came something far worse pure. Desperate terror filtered through. Humanity's universal translator. The voice belonged to someone who knew they were about to die. "This is Science Vessel Star, seeker of the Valerian Republic. The Rakthani Empire has boarded our ship. They're executing our researchers one by one, dear gods. There are children. Aboard, families. Please, if anyone in the galaxy receives this transmission, we need immediate assistance before they silence." The kind of silence that follows a gunshot. Morrison's hands trembled as he reached for the emergency cum. His 20 years of military service suddenly feeling insignificant. You know that feeling when you witness something so wrong, so fundamentally evil that your entire nervous system goes into overdrive? That's what hit every human in that command center like a freight train traveling at light speed. The Valerians weren't warriors. Hell, they weren't even merchants or colonizers. Intelligence files painted them as the galaxy's librarians, peaceful. Researchers who spent their time cataloging star formations and studying cosmic phenomena with the wonder of children discovering butterflies. They traveled in family groups, bringing their young on research missions because they believed knowledge should be shared across generations. And now they were being slaughtered by the Rakthani Empire. Morrison's blood didn't just run cold, it turned to liquid nitrogen. Every human who'd ever read a Rakthani intelligence report knew exactly what was happening aboard that research vessel. The Rakthani weren't just killers. They were artists of suffering. They fed on terror like vampires, prolonging death to maximize agony. Their slave markets across the Outer Rim were legendary for their cruelty. But here's the thing about humans. And this is something the galaxy constantly underestimated. We have this peculiar habit of losing our minds when innocents are threatened, especially children. Admiral Brooks. Morrison's voice cracked through the cum system like a whip. Emergency priority Alpha 1. The response time was 37 seconds. Morrison knew because he counted every single one, watching the tactical display show the Starseeker's beacon growing fainter by the moment. When Admiral Emma Brooks' weathered face appeared on the main screen, her gray eyes already held the fury of someone who'd heard the transmission. The war room erupted faster than a supernova. Officers poured in from every department, their faces reflecting the same primal rage that was building in Morrison's chest. You could practically smell the testosterone and adrenaline mixing with the recycled air. "It's obviously a trap," General Davis snapped, his paranoia doing what paranoia does best, focusing on the wrong enemy. Think about it logically. Why would they specifically contact Earth? We're 3 sectors away from their position. There are dozens of closer civilizations. Morrison wanted to punch the man. Logic? When children were being murdered. But Admiral Brooks understood. She'd served in the Centauri campaigns, witnessed firsthand what happened when Earth's children were threatened. Her response was surgical in its precision because, "General, we're the only species insane enough to cross 3 sectors of hostile space for complete strangers." The room fell silent. Everyone knew she was right. Here's what made humans different. From every other species in the galaxy, we were the only ones stupid enough to care about people we'd never met. While other civilizations calculated cost-benefit ratios and diplomatic consequences, humans heard children screaming and started loading weapons. Brooks leaned forward, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd made life-and-death decisions for 3 decades. "Morrison, you have full authorization for the 5th Fleet. Everything we've got." Morrison's jaw clenched so hard his teeth ached. "Ma'am, what are our rules of engagement?" And this is where Admiral Brooks revealed why she'd earned her reputation. As humanity's most feared military commander, her eyes transformed from concerned leader to apex predator in the span of a heartbeat. "Show them what happens when someone threatens children in human space," she said, each word dropping like a hammer blow. No survivors, no prisoners, no mercy. The transmission had done something to humanity's collective consciousness that even the aliens couldn't have predicted. It had awakened something primal, something that had been sleeping since Earth's children stopped needing protection from saber-toothed tigers and cave bears. You see? Humans weren't just another species that had crawled out of some peaceful garden world. We were the products of a planet that had spent millions of years trying to kill us. Every weather pattern, every predator, every natural disaster had been nature's attempt to eliminate the human species. We'd survived ice ages, asteroid impacts, volcanic eruptions, and plagues that should have wiped us out completely. And in the process, we'd developed something unique in the galaxy, a protective instinct so fierce, so absolutely uncompromising that it transcended species barriers. When humans heard children in danger, we didn't calculate odds or consider consequences. We grabbed the biggest weapons we could find and started shooting the Rakthani. Empire was about to learn why Earth's children slept safely at night. It wasn't because the galaxy was peaceful. It was because something far more dangerous than any alien nightmare stood guard in the darkness. But first, Morrison had to get his fleet moving. Time was running out, and somewhere in the cold vacuum of space, innocents were dying while monsters fed on their terror. The question wasn't whether humanity would respond. That decision had been made the moment they heard those children's voices in the transmission. The question was whether they'd arrive in time to save anyone, or if this would become a rescue mission that turned into something far darker, something that would teach the galaxy exactly why you never, ever threaten human children. The fabric of space-time literally tore apart as 43 human warships ripped through hyperspace like predators emerging from hell itself. If you've ever seen a pack of wolves descend on unsuspecting prey, multiply that image by 1,000 and add nuclear weapons. That's what the Rakthani fleet faced when humanity's Fifth Fleet materialized around Kepler-186f. These weren't the pristine, shiny vessels you see in recruitment videos. Every single hull bore the scars of battles fought across the galaxy's most dangerous sectors. Plasma burns from the Zeta Reticuli incident. Impact craters from asteroid warfare in the Vega system. These ships had earned their reputation the hard way by surviving encounters that destroyed lesser fleets. The Rakthani had been expecting maybe a patrol vessel, possibly a diplomatic ship filled with bureaucrats ready to negotiate. You know, the kind of civilized response that every other species in the galaxy would have sent. What they got instead was humanity's absolute finest killers. Armed with weapons that violated several galactic conventions and led by officers who'd learned warfare in Earth's most brutal conflicts, Captain Tyler Reaper Johnson stood on the bridge of the flagship UTS Vengeance, his calloused hands gripping the command rail as tactical displays updated in real time. The nickname wasn't a joke. Johnson had earned it during the Martian colonial wars, where he'd personally accounted for 17 enemy vessels in a single engagement. His crew called him Reaper because death followed in his wake like a faithful hound. At the sight that greeted him through the viewports would have broken lesser men. The Valerian research vessel Starseeker hung in the void like a wounded animal, its elegant hull punctured and bleeding atmosphere. Sleek Rakthani destroyers clung to it like metallic parasites, their boarding tubes still attached and feeding on the helpless ship. But here's what the Rakthani didn't understand about humans. We don't see tactical disadvantages when innocents are involved. We see targets. Sir, incoming transmission from the Rakthani fleet commander. Lieutenant Ashley Rodriguez reported, her voice steady despite the fury burning in her eyes. Rodriguez had grown up on Luna Colony, where children learned to handle weapons before they could properly walk. The thought of alien monsters torturing families made her trigger finger itch with anticipation. The holographic projector flickered to life, revealing something that would haunt normal people's nightmares for years. The Rakthani commander stood, nearly 8 feet tall, its mantis-like form covered in chitinous armor that gleamed with a sickly green sheen. Razor-sharp mandibles clicked together as it spoke, while soulless black eyes reflected nothing but hunger and cruelty. This wasn't just an alien, this was evolution's mistake. A creature that had somehow developed intelligence without developing a conscience. Unknown vessels, the thing hissed, its voice carrying the arrogance of a species that had never faced real opposition. Retreat immediately from this system. This territory now belongs to the Rakthani Empire, by right of conquest. We are currently harvesting these specimens for our slave markets in the Outer Rim territories. Harvesting, like they were talking about crops instead of families. Johnson's expression never changed. Not a muscle twitched in his weathered face. Not a flicker of emotion crossed his steel-gray eyes. But everyone on that bridge knew they were witnessing something legendary. The moment when humanity's most dangerous predator locked onto his prey. You want to know what forged men like Tyler Johnson? Growing up in the ruins of Detroit after? The resource wars, where gangs of raiders made the Rakthani look like Sunday school teachers. Fighting in the trenches of Mars during the colonial uprising, where the thin atmosphere meant that every battle was fought with the knowledge that a single hull breach meant death for everyone. These experiences didn't just create soldiers, they created something far more dangerous. "This is Captain Johnson of the Terran Defense Force," he replied, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who'd stared death in the face so many times they'd become old friends. "You have 30 seconds to release those civilians and withdraw from this system." Alien's laugh sounded like glass breaking in a blender, sharp, cruel, and absolutely confident. Terrans, the mythical Deathworlders? Its mandibles clicked in what passed for amusement among its species. "Our intelligence reports indicate your vessels are primitive, your numbers insufficient for meaningful resistance. Surrender immediately, and we may allow you to live long enough to provide entertainment in our combat arenas." Now here's where things get interesting. Every other species in the galaxy would have started calculating odds, running threat assessments, maybe calling home for reinforcements. But humans? We have this peculiar habit of getting really, really angry when someone threatens to make us fight for their amusement. Johnson turned to his weapons officer, Chief Petty Officer Marcus Webb, a man whose smile had been known to make hardened Marines reconsider their life choices. "Chief Webb," Johnson said with the casual tone of someone ordering coffee, 30 seconds just became 0. The excitement that rippled through the bridge was almost electric. You could feel it in the air at that moment when professional warriors realized they were about to do what they were born for. Every human crew member had heard the original distress call. They'd listened to children screaming for help while monsters tortured their families. This wasn't just another military engagement. This was personal, Chief. Webb's fingers danced across his weapons console with the practiced grace of a concert pianist. Except instead of creating music, he was preparing to create something far more. Beautiful justice delivered at the speed of light. The Vengeance's weapon systems hummed to life, the sound like barely contained thunder. But here's what made this moment truly terrifying for thee. Then I thought they were dealing with a rational species that would negotiate, calculate costs, and consider diplomatic solutions. They had no idea they'd just poked the galaxies. Apex predators with a very sharp stick. The human fleet spread out in attack formation with the fluid precision of a school of sharks. Sensing blood in the water, 43 warships, each one crewed by individuals who'd grown up on a planet where everything's the weather, the animals, even the plants had tried to kill them since birth. The Rakhtani were about to learn why Earth's children slept peacefully at night. It wasn't because the galaxy was safe. It was because something far more dangerous, any alien nightmare, stood guard in the darkness. And that something was about to show them exactly what happened when you made the mistake of threatening human innocence. The question wasn't whether the Rakthani would survive the next few minutes. The question was whether any of them would live long enough to warn the rest of their empire about the terrible mistake they'd just made. The universe screamed. That's the only way to describe what happened when 43 human warships opened fire simultaneously, turning the cold vacuum of space into a blazing testament to humanity's capacity for righteous violence. The opening barrage didn't just light up the darkness, it rewrote the laws of physics in a brilliant display of controlled destruction that would have made supernovas jealous. You know how people always say that space battles are silent? They're wrong. When that much concentrated energy gets unleashed at once, it creates electromagnetic pulses that sing through ship hulls like the galaxy's most terrifying orchestra. The Rakthani fleet found themselves listening to their own death song, composed in frequencies of pure annihilation. Human weapon systems, born from a species that had spent millennia turning everything from sharp sticks to split atoms into Instruments of war tore through Rakthani shields like they were made of tissue paper soaked in gasoline. These weren't the elegant energy weapons that most civilized species use for their polite little conflicts. These were the brutal, efficient tools of a race that had learned warfare on a planet where second place meant extinction. Directed particle beams, relativistic kill vehicles, plasma cannons that could melt through a mountain. The Rakthani had never faced anything like it, because frankly, no other species in the galaxy was insane enough to build weapons this devastating. Most civilizations developed defensive technologies alongside offensive ones, creating a balance that made warfare more of a gentleman's game than actual combat. Humans? We'd skipped the gentleman part entirely and jumped straight to overwhelming firepower solves all problems. Aboard the crippled Starseeker, Dr. Kelvin pressed his face against a cracked viewport, watching his captors transform from hunters into prey in the span of heartbeats. The gentle Valerian scientist had spent the last 6 hours watching his colleagues die slowly, one by one, as the Rakthani fed on their terror like cosmic vampires. He'd resigned himself to joining them in whatever horrible fate awaited, but now he was witnessing something that would redefine his understanding of the universe itself. Human Frigitant, we're talking about a ship barely 1/5 the size of a Rakthani. Battle crews, ants through concentrated enemy fire, with the impossible grace of a ballet dancer performing in a thunderstorm. Its pilot wasn't just avoiding destruction, they were making it look easy, spinning and diving through plasma bursts that should have vaporized anything in their path. The frigate's weapons spoke with surgical precision, each shot calculated to inflict maximum damage with minimum energy expenditure. Armor plating that had been designed to withstand asteroid impacts peeled away like old paint. The massive alien battlecruiser, a ship that had terrorized 3 solar systems, began venting atmosphere and spinning helplessly through space like a broken toy? Impossible. Dr. Lisa whispered beside him, her researcher's mind struggling to process what she was seeing.
How are they?
How are they so deadly? Their ships are smaller. Their numbers fewer. How are they winning? Kelvin found himself transfixed by the human fleet's movements. Every ship moved with lethal purpose. No wasted motion, no hesitation, no mercy. It was like watching apex predators hunt in perfect coordination, each vessel knowing exactly where the others would be before they got there. They fight like they were born in war itself, he said, and the words felt inadequate to describe what he was witnessing. Because here's the thing about humans that the rest of the galaxy consistently underestimated. They weren't just another species that had developed space travel. They were the survivors of a planet that had spent millions of years actively trying to kill them. Ice ages, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, plagues, predators, weather patterns that could flash freeze or incinerate entire continents. Earth had thrown everything it had at humanity. And humanity had not just survived, but thrived. Rakthani Commander's next transmission crackled across every comm channel in the system. And for the first time, his voice carried something besides arrogance. Raw, undiluted panic bled through the universal translator. This is impossible. Our intelligence reports indicated humans were a minor species, barely advanced beyond primitive space travel. How do you possess such devastating weapons? How are your inferior numbers defeating our superior fleet? Captain Johnson's response echoed through the void with the calm authority of someone explaining basic mathematics to a confused child. But there was something else in his voice, a cold satisfaction that spoke of justice finally being served. You want to know how we got so good at killing? Johnson asked, his words carrying across every frequency like a promise of doom. We learned on a world where everything, the weather, the animals, even the plants, tried to murder us on a daily basis. We didn't build these weapons to conquer other species. We built them to survive on a planet that wanted us dead. Another Rakthani ship exploded in brilliant fire, its destruction painting the surrounding space in shades of orange and gold. And you, Johnson continued, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any scream, just gave us a target. The battle wasn't just turning in humanity's favor, it was becoming a systematic extermination. But even as Dr. Kelvin watched his captors being destroyed with ruthless efficiency, A new fear began to creep into his mind. Time was running out for the survivors. Still trapped aboard the Starseeker, he could hear them in the distance, the screams of his colleagues, still being tortured by Rakathani soldiers, who hadn't gotten the message that their fleet was being annihilated. The boarding parties were still inside his ship, still feeding on terror, still killing innocents while their rescue played out in the void around them. The urgency was building to unbearable levels. The human fleet had proven they could destroy the Rakathani ships, but would they be fast enough to save the people still trapped inside? Would Dr. Kelvin's colleagues live to see their rescuers, or would they become casualties of a battle fought for their freedom? As another enemy vessel died in nuclear fire, one terrible question burned in Dr. Kelvin's mind. How many of his friends would still be alive when this was over? The answer, he realized with growing dread, might depend on just how quickly these terrifying human warriors could finish what they'd started. And somewhere in the ship's depths, another scream echoed through the corridors, a countdown to tragedy that even humanity's devastating firepower might not be able to stop. The assault pods hit the Starseeker's hull like metallic meteors, their impact charges detonating with surgical precision to create perfect breaches in the alien vessel's superstructure. Marine Colonel Nathan Bulldog Peterson was the first through the smoking hole, his power armor servos whining as he moved with the deadly grace of a man who'd spent 30 years perfecting the art of controlled violence. Peterson had earned his nickname during the siege of Titan Station, where he'd held a critical choke point against overwhelming odds for 6 straight hours. The enemy had called him Bulldog because once he locked onto a target, he never let go. Today, his target was every single Rakathani soldier aboard this ship. His team followed behind him like avenging angels clad in military-grade ceramite armor. 12 of humanity's finest warriors, each one handpicked for their ability to deliver death with ruthless efficiency while protecting innocence with unwavering dedication. These weren't just soldiers, they were the kind of men and women who ran toward gunfire when everyone else ran away. The first thing that hit them wasn't enemy fire or alien resistance. It was the smell. You know that metallic taste you get in your mouth when you're terrified? Multiply that by 1,000 and add the stench of burned flesh, spilled blood, and something else, something that made every human instinct scream danger. It was the smell of pure, concentrated terror, so thick in the recycled air that it seemed to coat their throats like oil. Jesus Christ, whispered Corpsman Jake Miller, a man who'd seen combat on 7 different worlds and thought he was beyond being shocked. But this wasn't combat. This was systematic torture elevated to an art form. They found the Rakathani interrogation chamber 3 corridors in. And Peterson's anger didn't just spike, it went completely nuclear. 8 Valerian researchers hung from biomechanical torture, devices that seemed designed by someone who understood exactly how to maximize suffering without allowing the mercy of unconsciousness. The gentle aliens' large eyes had been dulled by agony, their soft features twisted into expressions no sentient being should ever wear. But here's what made Peterson's blood boil beyond the point of rational thought that Rakathani hadn't been torturing these people for information. They'd been feeding on their pain like cosmic vampires, drawing some sick sustenance from the terror of innocence. Computer terminals around the chamber displayed neural activity readings, showing how the aliens had been monitoring and prolonging their victims' suffering for maximum effect. "Sir," Sergeant Maria Santos called out, her voice carrying the steady professionalism of someone who'd learned to function while her soul screamed for vengeance. Santos had grown up in the gang territories of New Los Angeles, where survival meant becoming harder than the streets that tried to break you. Contact Rakathani soldiers, armed and moving to intercept. The mantis-like aliens came around the corner with their weapons raised, their movements fluid and predatory. Under normal circumstances, they would have been formidable opponents. 8 feet tall, naturally armored, and armed with energy weapons that could punch through most known materials. But these weren't normal circumstances. These were 12 humans who'd just seen evidence of systematic torture inflicted on families. The Marines opened fire without hesitation, without warning, without a single second of doubt. Human weapons designed to stop charging grizzly bears, Martian sand tigers, and other Earth predators that didn't understand the concept of giving up turned the alien soldiers into steaming fragments of chitin and meat. The sound was like a thunderstorm trapped in a metal box. "Clear," Peterson barked, stepping over what remained of their opposition. No quarter asked, none given, none deserved. They moved deeper into the ship with the methodical precision of exterminators, cleaning out a particularly nasty infestation. Every corridor brought fresh horrors evidence of the Rakani's systematic cruelty, their complete disregard for anything resembling mercy or honor. But it also brought them closer to their real objective, the survivors. They found them huddled. In the ship's central core, 19 adults and 12 children pressed together behind failing energy barriers that flickered like dying stars. The sight hit Peterson harder than any enemy weapon ever had. Families clinging to each other while monsters prowled outside their sanctuary. Parents trying to shield their young from horrors no child should witness. Dr. Kelvin was the first to approach, his movements cautious as he studied these armored humans who'd fought their way through an army of nightmares to reach them. The Valerian scientist's large eyes reflected hope and terror in equal measure. Unable to quite believe that salvation had arrived wearing the face of another predator species. But there was something different about these predators, where the Raktani's eyes held only hunger and cruelty. The human's eyes held something the universe rarely saw: compassion wrapped in unbreakable steel. Peterson's helmet retracted with a soft hiss, revealing a face that told the story of 3 decades, spent in humanity's service. Scars from the Proxima Centauri campaign traced silver lines across weathered skin, gray threaded through hair that had once been black. But his eyes held the kind of gentle strength that children instinctively trusted and enemies learned to fear. "Are you injured?" he asked, his voice carrying the practiced calm of someone who delivered bad news and good news with equal authority. "Do you need immediate medical attention?" Dr. Kelvin's voice shook as he answered. "They killed 8 of our research team, tortured them slowly while the rest of us watched. They said, dot." His voice broke slightly. "They said we were too weak to deserve existence." Peterson's expression transformed into something that would have made glacier ice look warm and welcoming. When he spoke, his words carried the weight of absolute certainty. "Well, Doc, seems like they got that backwards. You're alive and breathing. You're about to become atoms floating in vacuum." As if summoned by his words, the ship shuddered as another massive explosion lit up the space outside. Through a nearby hull breach, they could see the battle's final moments playing out like a symphony of destruction. The Rakthani flagshipper, vessel so massive it had its own gravitational field, was being systematically dismantled by concentrated human firepower. Piece by piece, section by section, the alien dreadnought came apart under the relentless assault of ships barely a tenth its size. It wasn't just military superiority they were witnessing. It was the universe's most effective predators demonstrating why you never, ever threaten their pack. "No mercy," Peterson growled, echoing humanity's oldest promise to bullies everywhere. But as he watched the alien ship die in nuclear fire, a new concern began to gnaw at him. The rescue was successful. The enemy was being eliminated, but something felt wrong. The Rakthani had been too confident, too certain of their victory even. When facing obviously superior human forces, what if this whole engagement was just the opening move in a larger game? What if somewhere in the depths of space, the real Rakthani fleet was already moving to respond to this attack? The thought sent ice through Peterson's veins. It saved these innocents, but had they just started a war that would consume the entire galaxy? 2 hours and 17 minutes after the first human warship had torn through hyperspace, the Kepler 186F system was quiet again. But it was the kind of quiet that follows a thunderstorm, heavy with the weight of what had just transpired and electric with the knowledge that everything had changed forever. Where the Rakthani fleet had once prowled like apex predators, only expanding clouds of superheated debris drifted through the void. Twisted metal fragments caught starlight like scattered diamonds, each piece a testament to what happened when a species that had never known defeat encountered one that had never known surrender. The rescue operation had been flawless. Not just successful, flawless. Military historians would study this engagement for generations. trying to understand how 43 human ships had annihilated a force 3 times their size without losing a single vessel. The answer, of course, lay not in superior technology or numbers, but in something far more fundamental: the difference between hunters and prey. Admiral Brooks' weathered face appeared as a hologram on the Vengeance Bridge, her gray eyes scanning the tactical displays with the satisfied expression of someone whose faith in human capability had been thoroughly vindicated. Captain Johnson stood at attention, but there was something different about his posture, now the loose-limbed stance of a warrior whose job was finished and finished well. Casualties? Brooks asked, though her tone suggested she already knew. The answer would be minimal. The Fifth Fleet didn't just train for victory, they trained for perfect victory. Minor hull damage to the Phoenix from a lucky shot that penetrated their port shields. Johnson reported with the crisp precision of a man who understood that details mattered in war. 3 crew members wounded, all stable and expected to make full recoveries, enemy casualties. He glanced at his tactical officer, Chief Webb, who was still grinning like someone who just won the Galactic Lottery. Total elimination, sir. Its long-range sensors confirmed 0 Rachthani survivors detected. Their escape pods were either destroyed in the initial barrage or chose not to eject. Webb's smile turned predatory. Apparently they preferred to go down with their ships rather than face human interrogation. Smart choice, really. After what those monsters had done to innocent families, human interrogation would have made their own torture chambers look like day spas. Dr. Kelvin sat in the Vengeance's medical bay, gentle features still, bearing the haunted expression of someone who'd witnessed both humanity's darkest enemies and its brightest heroes in the span of a single day. The Valerian scientist had spent the last hour receiving treatment for his injuries. While listening to the humans discuss the battle with clinical detachment, that's what struck him most about these terrifying warriors. They spoke of the massacre with no joy, no satisfaction, no bloodthirsty celebration. Just cold, professional necessity. Like surgeons discussing a successful operation or engineers reviewing a completed construction project, Captain Johnson, Dr. Kelvin said hesitantly, his voice still weak from his ordeal, but growing stronger with each word. May I ask you something that's been troubling me? Why did you come? Our species had no formal alliance with yours, no treaties or mutual defense agreements. You risked your entire fleet for complete strangers. Johnson turned from the tactical display, his expression softening in a way that would have surprised the Rachthani commanders if any had survived to see it. Here was the same man who'd just orchestrated the systematic extermination of an entire enemy fleet, now showing the kind of gentle concern usually reserved for family members, Dr. Johnson said, settling into a chair beside the medical bed, with the easy grace of someone comfortable in his own skin, where we come from. We have an old saying, evil triumphs only when good people do nothing. You sent out a distress call. Children were in danger. That made it our fight, regardless of politics or alliances. Dr. Kelvin's large eyes reflected confusion that went beyond simple language barriers. But the risk to your people, the potential for retaliation from the Rachthani Empire, the diplomatic complications, surely your leaders considered these factors. Johnson's laugh was short but not unkind. It was acceptable, he said, cutting off the scientist's concerns with the casual dismissal of someone who'd faced far worse odds and survived to tell about it. Rachthani made one fatal error in their intelligence assessment of humanity. He leaned forward, his steel-gray eyes holding the Valerian's gaze with unwavering intensity. They thought coming from a death world made us good at dying. Tough, maybe. Resilient, certainly. But they never realized that millions of years of fighting for survival on the galaxy's most hostile planet didn't just make us hard to kill. Johnson's smile would have made a shark nervous. It made us extremely good at killing. Through the medical bay's viewports, they could see Valerian rescue ships arriving in the system's leak, peaceful vessels designed for research and exploration, not warfare. The contrast with the human fleet was stark and telling. Where Valerian ships curved with elegant lines that spoke of harmony and scientific pursuit, human vessels bristled with weapon systems and armor plating that promised swift, brutal death. To anyone foolish enough to threaten their crews, Dr. Kelvin watched his people's ships dock with the human vessels, witnessing something that would fundamentally alter his understanding of galactic civilization. For the first time in recorded history, he was seeing a species that would cross the void to fight other people's wars, not for conquest, not for resources, not for territorial expansion or political advantage, but simply because it was the right thing to do. "Captain," he said softly, "what do you call this? This willingness to risk everything for strangers?" Johnson considered the question for a moment, watching as Valerian families were reunited with their rescued loved ones. Children who had faced certain death were now laughing and crying in their parents' arms. Their nightmare finally over thanks to warriors they'd never met from a species they'd only heard about in whispered legends. "Call it protecting the innocent," Johnson replied. But there was something deeper in his voice now, a recognition that they had just participated in something larger than a simple rescue operation. Though I suspect the galaxy might have a different name for it. And Dr. Kelvin, watching human Marines gently carry wounded Valerian children to safety while their warships stood guard against a universe full of predators, understood exactly what that name would be. Hope for the first time since achieving spaceflight. The peaceful species of the galaxy had something they'd never possessed before: guardians who would answer their calls for help, not because they had to, but because they chose to. Warriors who measured their success not in conquered territories or accumulated wealth, but in the number of innocents who slept safely because evil had met its match. The Rakthani Empire would spread word of this defeat, and other predator species would take notice. But so would the victims, the researchers, the traders, the families just trying to make their way through a dangerous universe. They would know that somewhere in the darkness, Earth's children stood watch, and that knowledge would change everything. The end.